You are listening to the 4-Phase Cycle Podcast with your hosts, Megan and Alex of Zesty Ginger. If you're looking to naturally balance hormones and learn how to work with your body instead of against it, you have come to the right place. As a duo of an integrative MD and a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, we use the 4 phases of the feminine cycle in combination with functional lab work to transform the lives of the women we work with. Just a quick reminder though, this information is not intended to diagnose, manage, or treat disease. Always consult with your own doctor before making changes. Ready to take control of your health? Let's get started.
Hello ladies, it's Alex here again. Thank you so much for joining me. We are going to get into some of the more fun woo-woo little things that we're going to talk about for the next 2 episodes. And before you go skipping these, make sure you listen to these in the order that you have been going in, because they are just as important as the underlying physiology. They're just as important to your healing journey, and they will be tools that you will have with you for the rest of your life, so that you can have this toolbox that we've been working on of, life will take you on whatever journey it's going to take you, wherever you are meant to be. And along the way, you will deviate from this perfect health picture, right? You could have babies, you could have a death in the family, you could lose your job, you could get a job that pays a ton more money, you're going to travel. There's all these things, good and bad, that will come up that you will need to course correct from, because they will be outside forces, you pushing you into kind of a new state. And sometimes with that new state comes a bit of rebalancing, and so it's really important to have tools that allow you to find your center again and never have to be at the mercy of a practitioner necessarily to figure out. Now, it is important to have practitioners. Obviously, I'm a little biased with being a doctor, but you ideally would not be dependent on them. They are a resource for you. They're a tool. They're a great way for you to get help and all the good stuff that goes with that. But ideally, what we want you to have is a toolbox that you can come back to over and over and over again in your life. And so with all that said, please make sure you are doing these things and giving them the appropriate weight, because they're just as important as the elixirs. They're just as important as the functional lab work. All of that stuff has a place, and there's a reason we include it in our living with the cycle sort of thinking. So today I wanted to talk about journaling, and just as a little bit of a background, it's important for you to know that Megan and I historically have not been fans of journaling. I remember when we first met, we would talk about it because there's so many scenarios where people recommend journaling or thinking about something through journaling. And both of us were like, we tried it together. We got journals it's called the 5-minute journal. They're really great. It goes through every day where you have your top 3 things that you're grateful for, the affirmation for the day. I think it's a wonderful tool, but Megan and I even got them. We stuck with them for a while and then kind of petered off. So because we have personally struggled with something, obviously I think it makes us a little bit more able to teach this stuff, because if you're naturally drawn to journaling, great. I'm going to give you tools to use it to your best outcome and the way that's going to best serve you. But then if you haven't been and you're like, I've tried to keep a journal, I've tried to keep a diary when I was little and just never got anywhere, these are the tools that are going to help you succeed. And the reason that we want to journal is, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in this podcast, but your goal for journaling is to take subconscious things that are impacting your life and determining how you live and how you experience the world, and make them conscious so that you can make the decision to either keep them in your life or deliberately let them go, right? Because what we tell ourselves we want when we're awake and in a productive state, like I want to get healthy, can be very much in contrast with what we believe about ourselves. And ultimately, what we believe about ourselves deep, deep down will become the basis of our reality. Our consciousness, our decision making, our subconscious is the biggest determinator we have of our successes and our failures. And so when you find yourself shooting for a goal over and over again and missing, we have to start thinking about some of the underlying beliefs. And let me give you an example. Like I've said in these podcasts, I have a really long history with chronic pain. Because of that, I spent the first about 5 years really struggling. It was, tears on a weekly basis over this. I would have meltdowns over just feeling horrible, not being able to sit. The clothes would be uncomfortable on me. Like anywhere I was touched on my body, it would just kill. If anyone would kind of pat me on the shoulder, my shoulder would just be in so much pain for the rest of the day, and they barely had touched me. So I spent so much time being miserable. Then as I kind of took that misery and channeled it into, okay, I'm going to become a pain doctor and do a better job than what I'm experiencing. That became my story. So all of a sudden, that bad event that happened to me was my motivator and my reasoning to keep pushing forward and helping others. And that was a really empowering, great thing. But underlying that belief that I was going to take my negative experiences and turn them into something good, and that fueled the purpose for my life. Within that story, I had built in, by necessity, the underlying belief that I was sick, and I was using it to help others and use it to my advantage and their advantage. However, I realized more recently, in the last year or so, that while that was good at the time and that was what I needed to make the mental shift to, I am now at the point, I'm talking 12 years in, I'm now at the point where it's time to release that story of being sick and become the next version of myself that I need to be. And that journey that I'm summarizing to you, but it took me a long time to get here. And I think partially, I was working with practitioners who were helping me think through things. Megan and I have talked about she's an energy healer that we work with, Cameron. She's amazing. And, journaling and meditation and all of this has led me to this point. And now that's really my major goal, is to change that conversation, not I am a chronic pain person, into I am a healthy person who has a history of chronic pain, and I am ready to let that history go, not having forgotten it, but having moved past it so that I could be more effective. I realized that in sticking with that old outdated story and that subconscious belief, I was hindering how useful to other people I could be, because by putting a cap on my own health and my own success, I couldn't really break through to that other side where what I ultimately want to become is a healer, a speaker, a teacher, a community gatherer of women. And all of these things require me to be healthy so that I can go on and be as effective as I possibly can be. So this story not only hurts me that I've been telling myself, because it hinders how much I can get better, but it also limits how effective I can be, and it limits my ability to help all of these other people, right? And so with that new understanding, then I can begin to bring that belief up. I've examined it, I've set deliberate intentions for what I want, and then it's a matter of kind of re-drilling it into my subconscious. And I saw a really cool quote the other day that you can't walk, I can't remember who said it, I saw it on Instagram, but you can't walk 10 miles into the forest and expect to get out in 5. And you can't walk 10 miles into the forest and you can't get out in 5. And that's what they were getting at, and that was kind of a fun way to say it, is that you have set up these beliefs over your lifetime. So however old you are. So for me, I've spent 3 decades building this story that has, woven and changed over time. But essentially, my beliefs have been around for 3 decades. It's going to take me a little while to get to this new one. And it's a matter of repetition, a matter of exposing yourself to new ideas, and always kind of having an inflow of positive new ideas so that you begin to reaffirm these things for yourself. All right, so hopefully now you understand why we're so passionate about this, why we think that it's as helpful as it is. So let's get to the meat of this, because I really want to help you find a way to be successful with journaling. All right, so strategies for journaling success. Step number 1, we highly recommend getting a pretty journal that's meaningful to you. On Amazon, they have all sorts of really cool stuff for Christmas, or maybe it was her birthday for Megan. I got this like really pretty wood cut out. It's like a geometric figure it's a kind of a wood bound journal, and then on the inside is pages. I also have ones that are like beautiful pictures throughout the journal, and then the rest of it is blank, and it's like gold gilded on the edges. The reason to do this is the equivalent of why you get workout clothes when you are establishing a healthy lifestyle. For you to be the kind of person that journals, you kind of start thinking through, what if I was a person that loved journaling? What would I have? Well, I would probably have a place where I keep my journal. I probably appreciate that journal, so I get a nice one. I probably have some pens around in that same place. I probably have a ritual for it, right? And so once you step into that new role that you want, the next action steps can become really simple. And so it's setting your life up so that you are a person that journals. The only caveat to this, I'd say, is don't wait for the perfect scenarios. I can't count the number of times where I was in a bad negative place, where I was at work frustrated, or I was having a bad pain day, or I was spotting again for the millionth time, and I just went and got some printer paper at work. I took out a sheet of paper and I just brain dumped all my anxieties and things with that. And so you don't have to wait for the perfect time. All you have to do is grab a piece of paper and a pen and get started. That is all you need. And a lot of times, like, it's very cliche, but like most artists, I have horrible handwriting. Even I can't read my own handwriting half the time after I've, stepped away from something. So there's also been plenty of times where I've brain dumped something and then tossed it. And so you don't necessarily have to keep it, but it's kind of nice to go back and look at some of your old ideas and then how they've changed, because it's kind of like keeping a weight loss journal where you take pictures of yourself. Same kind of thing. You see your beliefs change and update, and it's really cool to go back and say, like, yeah, I was that person, but I've let that go. And it's really empowering to say, cool, I decided to be this new way. What else can I be excited to be like? And that's a really cool thing. So get pretty journal, I think, get a place, get things that make you feel good, and then you can kind of personalize your journal. You can inscribe it. I always put the date. I always put where I got it. A lot of my journals I've gotten while traveling, just because I'll have forgotten my journal at home and I'll get another one and I want to inscribe it. Like, I have one from when Megan and I traveled the Paleo Effects. I got it and I journaled it. And I have others that I've gotten on vacation and stuff. And it's kind of a fun thing to describe on the front cover how you got it. So those are all things that seem very, very trivial and small, but they can be really powerful in terms of reinforcing this new belief and this new idea and this new activity into your life. All right, so then the second, journaling success tip I have for you is instead of just writing on whatever, which you can do, and there's a time and a place for that, you can ask yourself questions. And examples of questions usually include things like, why do I keep having this particular scenario come up in my life over and over again, right? So whether it's I keep dealing with all of these doctors who don't listen to me, or why do I keep dating the same kind of person that doesn't ultimately give me what I need? Why do I not speak up when I don't like something and I let it happen? Like you're getting a haircut and you don't say, I don't like that, can you please change it? Or you're getting a massage and you don't speak up because you don't really enjoy the massage, but you won't say anything. Things like whatever they are for you, like why do I yell at my kids? Why am I always tired? The possibilities are endless, but the question always is, why is my reality not matching up with what I want to be like, or what I want my reality to be like? And whenever you see that kind of congruent reality, there's always a belief that underlies that, and then that belief needs to be plucked out of the deep recess of your mind and brought up for examination. And ultimately, most beliefs that don't serve us are quite flimsy in nature. Once you start examining them, they fall apart really, really easily, because they're always things like, I'm not good enough to be loved. Whereas when you actually bring it up to your consciousness, you can say, well, here's all of these examples where I'm loved. So how can I begin to challenge this underlying belief that I'm not good enough to be loved, right? I am already being loved. Why am I holding on to this idea that somehow I'm not good enough for that, right? And then when you address it like that, you can, every time that idea comes up, I'm not good enough to be loved, you can do affirmations that you are loved. You can call your best friend and experience that you are loved. And over time, as you show yourself evidence of that deliberately, then that becomes a really powerful thing. So usually what I do is I write the question up at the top of the paper or the top of the page I'm on, and then I do free writing pages. And if you haven't heard this, free pages are a concept that people do where early in the morning or at night, whenever you want to do it, you have a set goal of number of pages that you're going to write. And the goal is to just start writing and don't lift your pen off the paper until those 3, 5, 10 pages are covered. So you can even write like, hey, I don't have anything to write, I'm just writing this over and over until I think of something to say. And the whole idea behind free pages is that when you get all of that mental chatter out of your brain, like, hey, can't forget that the kids have camp next week, oh, I can't forget to pack for vacation, oh, I'm due for a haircut, oh, my eyebrows look like a disaster, let me go, I need to pluck them at some point, oh, let me go, my nails are too long and they're driving me crazy. All of that mental chatter that we feel like we have to upkeep over and over in our brain, it's like a little loop that kind of reminds us like, hey, don't forget to unplug the iron, don't forget, a lot of this stuff is good, but we need to get all of that out of our brain so that we can get to the really good stuff underneath. And you'll find that as you kind of explore this idea, for example, why do I want to be healthy? What underlying beliefs do I have? And as you write and you say, well, I believe this because I've been treated so poorly by the medical community. I was insulted by this nurse. I was dismissed by this doctor. This reminds me of the time when I was a kid and I felt like my parents didn't value me, where this was so important to me and everyone dismissed it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, shoot, I remember that. Like, that event it doesn't have to be a traumatic event or anything, but sometimes we just kind of stumble across, as we examine things, to events that go much, much farther back into our lives. And that is really, really powerful, because then you can say, like, where else is this coming up for me? And you'll notice people tend to have very similar patterns and very similar experiences and very similar ways of dealing with it, right? So almost any scenario that you've dealt with, someone has also dealt with it and has realized that there are underlying human things. Like we all want to be loved, and many of us don't feel good enough. That is just the experience that we have. And so many of these free writing pages end up revealing very basic beliefs that are short and likely don't even make a lot of sense when you look at them from your rational, quote unquote, mind, where you're like, well, it's not true that I'm like, no one wants to hear what I say. That's one of mine. It's true. Yes, there have been times where I felt like my voice hasn't been heard. And what I want is to be heard and to teach and do all of this stuff. And for me, uncovering that concept of I don't believe that people find what I say valuable has events, but I also have plenty of other ways to say, of examples of things that don't support that idea of where I have been heard or where I did make an impact, or where me bringing something up changed someone else's life or made it better, or I supported someone through what I said. And when you give yourself reasons or examples that as you write, you really begin to break that idea down. They end up being very, very flimsy. And then sometimes you will free write and kind of answer a question, and you will, instead of getting answers, you will have more questions, and that's perfectly okay. Keep track of those questions, address them the next time you journal. Maybe it's later that day, maybe it's the next day, maybe it's in a week, although in the beginning I recommend daily until you kind of get the hang of it. But then those questions become the next time around. You could do this indefinitely, but my journaling for success step number 3 is I maintain that doing this work within the setting of cycles is very important, because you could get really stuck. You could go down the rabbit hole of trying to evaluate like everything about your childhood and who caused that hurt and what idea you got from it. And that is all good work to do, but we don't want that to get so mired and stuck in that work that we can't move forward. And because ultimately what we need to do is bring these things up, process them, let them go, and then step into the role we want to play. It's never so that we can figure out everything. You're going to spend your whole life trying to figure out, oh, that one person said that one thing to me, and that's why I'm the way I am. It's good to do that work to get insight, but it's not good to stay there and get stuck in that work. So I like following cycles. So usually I pick one thing to work on at the beginning of a cycle. I like to journal based on moon stuff. As much as we talk about feminine cycles, and a lot of the journaling things I've given you as homework have been about doing it within the context of your cycle. And I recommend that you stick with that for a while. Later, though, you can kind of switch. I like to set my mental and emotional goals also based on the moon. Granted, a lot of my cycles tend to line up with the moon cycles, and that's probably just because I'm consciously incorporating the moon, and I'll go outside when it's a full moon. I'll kind of our not circadian rhythm, but our rhythms, we are prone to syncing up with the moon, and so mine generally do, unless I am transitioning from a new cycle phase or a full moon cycle phase. But yeah, I like doing that, but you don't have to. You can follow any cycle that you want, but the idea is that you will follow the ebb and flow. So if I'm following a moon cycle, I will set my goal or my exploration activity on the new moon. The new moon to the full moon is like that period of growth, getting to uncovering things, shedding light on it. And then the full moon culminates in being able to release that or take on the new thing that you want, sometimes both. And then the cycle that follows is releasing the old, incorporating the new, and all of that stuff. But you can certainly play around with how it's done. So limit yourself in a way, because a little bit of structure and limitation is good for moving forward. So whatever, sometimes my cycles will be based on self-love. Sometimes it'll be about my pain, about my hormonal health. Sometimes it'll be about my relationship. Sometimes it'll be about a problem that's bothering me. Whatever it is, as I journal and answer questions, I leave myself constructs so that I never spiral down into some rabbit hole I'm not able to get much out of. Okay, so that's 3. 4 is get inspiration for journaling elsewhere. I love things like oracle cards. I don't know any tarot, and I wish I did, but I so far have not chosen to have time to learn all the tarot cards. But I have several decks of oracle cards, and I basically use them as meditation or journaling cards. So I will shuffle them. I'll either find a spread or create a spread like, oh, I'm going to do 3 cards. The first one is my past experience with pain. The middle one is my current experience with pain, and the third one is my future experience with pain. And then as I flip over the cards and I read the explanations, I think about how that applied to my life, and then I journal on that. And sometimes, or for the most part, it can be really helpful. Those cards are meant to be general enough to fit most scenarios, and so it uncovers for you like, oh, that's a new way of thinking about it. Oh, I didn't think that I could be doing that. Maybe I do that, and that kind of thing. And so there's one called The Wild Unknown that I really love. It's an animal spirit deck, and I think it's phenomenal, but you don't have to. This is only just a tool that should make it more fun. It should never be another thing that you're stressed about buying. Other, free things are, you can go on Pinterest and you can search self-discovery questions. You can type in self-love, and there'll be questions. They'll be like self-exploration, self-development, all of those things. You can find blog posts and infographics and all of that of just lists and lists of things to ask yourself. And so I've done this where for a while, what I was doing was just kind of exploring myself. And so I would find all these questions, and then I would go through and answer each one honestly. And that led me to take stock of what was going on kind of under the hood. And then I was more able to deliberately and purposefully impact those underlying beliefs. But you can do that. You can tailor those. You can take those questions and just use them as examples and apply them to whatever you're working on this cycle. I also read a lot of books. I kind of replaced the spot where my Facebook app used to be with my Kindle app. And now, as I am kind of mindlessly clicking through my phone, instead of mindlessly scrolling through Facebook, I end up popping open Kindle, and I'm like, oh, hey, look, this awesome book that I'm reading. And so if you're trying to step away from social media a little bit, if it's gotten out of control, that's a really great way to do it. And then that way you can always expose yourself to new, better ideas because you pick that book. So you're not at the mercy of whatever shows up on your Facebook feed. You're reading a book that empowers you and makes you feel good. So I like doing that. And then I will, after I've read a little bit, I will go journal on that topic and then try to come up with a couple learning points. So I basically distill it down for myself and say, how can I use this information for my highest good? And so that can be a really fun way to journal. And then sometimes what I do with journaling is if I'm trying to incorporate an idea into my subconsciousness, it's a certain aspect to it after you've pointed out what you don't want is as you build new beliefs, it's a matter of saying them over and over and over again until you actually believe them. And so sometimes what I'll do when I'm thinking I need to get better at believing this new belief that I want, is I will just write that affirmation over and over and over again just until it sinks in. So that's when I do my little printer paper trick where I just do get out a piece of paper and I write what I want to believe over and over, and I allow that to sink in. And it's a bit of a passive process as you write, because the more you try to like force, beliefs don't really work like that. Beliefs you essentially need to step into and say, I need to release the old and pick up this new. And picking up this new is, it's an allowance, it's a receiving, it's not a muscling through. So when I do this, I allow my kind of mental chatter to turn off, and I just calmly, repetitively write down the thing. And I've noticed that in not trying to make this like really hard work, it ends up being a little bit more productive, and it ends up moving things at a quicker pace, because we are really good at learning how to function with our conscious mind. So it's like studying, but don't apply your studying habits or whatever your work habits to this, because you're not working with the same system. You're not like, you are learning something new, but it's not the same way. And so this should be I'm writing this and I'm allowing it to sink in. And that is that. Okay, so don't try to make this a more muscle through activity than it actually needs to be. And you'll see how quickly it can change your life. All right, ladies, thank you so much for joining me for this one. I went a little long because this is such an important subject, but hopefully you guys found that helpful. Please start, get a journal. If you have a journal, start doing it. Even if you can't get a journal, start doing it anyways. Get like a cheap notebook and go. You will want to explore yourself, and eventually, I believe, you'll get hooked. Come hang out with us over at on Instagram, where we usually hang out. We end up doing a lot of lives and things and stories. So that's zesty_ginger. And then if you have questions, make sure to email us. That's support@zestyginger.com. All right, ladies, have a wonderful day.
Hey, thanks for stopping by this Podclass. If you are ready to dig deeper into your health, really understand your cycle, stop guessing with random supplements, and start testing, our Healthy Hormones group starts September 27th. You can find more details at zestyginger.com/healthy hormones and find out if this is the place for you. And as always, we offer free 20-minute consultations, so jump on the phone with us and we'll help you decide if it's a good fit.